Well, with me here to discuss that on set is Clément Pairot. He's author of the first book in French on Bernie Sanders. Here it is. It's Démocrazies and Franchis dans la campagne de Bernie Sanders, if you'll excuse the French accent. It's a look behind the scenes of the Sanders campaign and a testimony as well to discover how the US Democrat Party works, if you like, with all its twists and turns. Let's, first of all, thanks very much for coming in and joining us. Let's hear from Bernie Sanders, first of all. This was a little bit earlier on. Still sounding pretty optimistic, wasn't he?
You cannot beat Trump with the same old kind of politics. What we need is a new politics that brings working class people into our political movement, which brings young people into our political movement, and which in November will create the highest voter turnout in American political history.
Yeah, just listening to that soundbite there of Bernie Sanders. I mean, despite all that, he must now be feeling pretty disappointed, don't you think?
It's a disappointment if we look at what was forecasted a few days ago. It's still a very big win. He is now second in delegates, a few delegates away from Joe Biden, which has benefited from a tremendous dynamic in the past 48 hours, which I think no one would have been able to plan that. What is sure now is that we are entering a long race, which is now, and sadly, a two-way race, Joe Biden versus Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky, isn't it? I mean, we're just hearing from Ketevan Gordestani, a correspondent in Washington. Obviously, the fear from Democrats now is you've got this real split. I mean, it could end up being pretty much 50-50 for each of them.
Exactly. And what is important to remember is that tonight was just 33% of the delegates. There is a lot going on in the next few weeks. There is a new debate on March 15th, which is actually too bad for Bernie Sanders, which performs well in debates and could have maybe gained some momentum with that. But that away, we have also to remember that the victories tonight for Joe Biden doesn't erase a single thing from his bad record, ability to lie on it, ability also to be quite confusive on stage. He confused his wife and his sisters 2 hours ago, and the fact that his platform so far doesn't have any major important proposal. And on that, Bernie Sanders has a lot to bring to the Democratic Party.
He has a lot, doesn't he? But it's very divisive, a lot of it. I mean, it's very, very left-wing, which some voters are completely turned off by.
Yeah, but if you face the reality, the climate emergencies, the social crisis, the fact that so many people don't make ends meet every end of month, I mean, there is no middle ground on that. And the fact that Bernie Sanders is pushing for a hardly progressive agenda, a very progressive agenda, is something that is just facing the reality. The back to normal proposal of Joe Biden may not be enough to bring back voters to the Democratic Party and to the poll.
Would he not, though, Joe Biden, manage to attract at least maybe some of those Donald Trump voters? Because you've got to attract those people as well who are really not going to be attracted at all by Bernie Sanders, are they? I mean, we've had a very, very right-wing president in Donald Trump. To go from that to somebody who's very on the left, that could be very difficult.
If you see that like a line, but first it's more like a circle, and there is some radicality on the way to assess the situation, which is shared by Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump first. And second of all, there is still 45% people who didn't show up to the poll in 2016. And this is key. I mean, Obama to win in a landslide victory in 2008 had turning out of 60%. And we have to go back to that even maybe better. And that is only possible if you have something that inspires voters to come out. And I guess Bernie Sanders has more the ability for that than Joe Biden. But we cannot presume this primary defies all expectations.
Let's talk about the other side of your book as well, because you have quite a quirky way, don't you, of looking at the whole process here. I mean, for people who are not used to this process, I'm obviously not American myself, all this talk of caucuses and primaries and the massive build-up. I mean, it feels like we're in the middle of an election, and it's not really the election to be the president yet. It's just the election to be the candidate to take on the president.
Exactly. The process is extremely heavy and has enormous biases. I think what this book brings to the mind of people who are not familiar with the American democracy is how undemocratic the process is. I don't say that the US are no more democracy. I say that good democracy is democracy that you check every time, that it's healthy, it brings everybody the ability to vote, and it gives a fair coverage of the race. This is not the case, and you can see also that again tonight on CNN and MSNBC, the ability to, for example, doesn't talk that much about Elizabeth Warren and who knows that Tulsi Gabbard is still running? I mean, we are talking about candidates in the race to be the most powerful person on earth.
And what about the financial side of it as well? Because there's so much money, isn't there, piled into this, even at this stage.
Yeah. That is the conclusion of tonight, and it's a positive conclusion for democracy that Bloomberg, with his $500 billion spent, doesn't seem to perform that well. And that would have been a very important trigger if that happened, because the weight money has in the race is already that much important that it would have been terrible if Bloomberg would have been able, I guess, like winning California with that money. That being said, Bernie Sanders is the only one in the race to promote a public funding of elections and a maximum of spending. I mean, he's not the only one on the maximum of spending, but he was the only one in 2016, and he's the only one to fund himself without any super PAC, only with small donations, 1.5 million so far.
Yeah. Just got 15 seconds just to ask you very, very quickly at the end. Bernie Sanders, can he still go all the way, even after tonight's results, which are, let's face it, disappointing for him?
Of course. We are just at the beginning of the race. Bernie Sanders is here not for him, but for us, as he says. And he is here to get the best platform for the Democratic Party and to have as many people, may they be in the White House and in the damn tickets, elected on a progressive agenda in November.
Good to have you with us, Clément Pairot. Thanks very much. That's
Thank
the book, Démocrazies, and you were telling me just before we came on air, if you want it in English, you can find it as well on the Kindle, can't you?
Exactly.
So, if you do want to read it, Démocrazies, you'll find it on there. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us.